She greeted me with a flower and accidentally proposed, according to alien law. The unintended betrothal. The transport shuttle. Meridian descended through the swirling lavender clouds of Zalithia Prime, its hull gleaming against the alien sunset. Jackson Reed pressed his face to the viewport, marveling at the crystalline spires that jutted from the planet's surface like frozen lightning. As the Terran Federation's youngest xenobiologist and newly appointed diplomatic attaché, this was his first official contact mission, and he was determined not to mess it up. "Remember, Dr. Reed," Captain Morrison's gruff voice crackled through the comm. "We're here to establish peaceful relations, not study their ecosystem. Keep the science talk to a minimum and let Ambassador Theron handle the politics." Jackson straightened. His formal diplomatic uniform, the deep blue fabric still feeling foreign after years of wearing lab coats. "Understood, Captain. Though I have to say, their bioluminescent architecture is fascinating from a—" "Reed. Right. Politics first, science second." The shuttle touched down on a landing pad that seemed to be grown rather than built, its organic curves glowing softly with internal light. Through the transparent walls, Jackson could see figures approaching, tall, graceful beings whose skin shimmered with patterns of light that shifted like aurora across their bodies. Ambassador Theron, a distinguished Zalithian with silver markings that denoted his diplomatic status, glided up the shuttle's ramp. His translator device hummed softly as he spoke in accented but fluent Terran standard. "Welcome to Zalithia Prime. Honored guests, I am Ambassador Theron of the Third Resonance. We are pleased to finally meet our neighbors from the Terra system." Captain Morrison stepped forward, extending his hand in the traditional human greeting. "Captain James Morrison of the Terran Federation. We're honored by your invitation." Theron studied the outstretched hand with curiosity before grasping it gently. Ah, yes, the contact ritual. Fascinating how different species express welcome. His bioluminescent patterns pulsed in what Jackson hoped was amusement rather than alarm. "This is Dr. Jackson Reed, our xenobiologist and cultural liaison," Morrison continued, gesturing toward Jackson. Jackson stepped forward eagerly. "It's an incredible honor, Ambassador. Your civilization's integration of biology and technology is unprecedented in our records. The way you've cultivated living architecture suggests an understanding of cellular manipulation that—" Morrison's sharp look cut him off mid-sentence. Theron's patterns brightened with what seemed like genuine interest. "You study life, Dr. Reed? How wonderful! Our Princess Lyrelai shares your passion for the living sciences. Perhaps you would enjoy meeting her during the welcoming ceremony." "That would be amazing," Jackson replied, his scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic protocol once again. They were escorted through corridors that breathed with organic rhythm, walls pulsing gently with bioluminescent veins. The air itself seemed alive, carrying floral scents that shifted and evolved with each breath. Jackson's mind raced with questions about the atmospheric composition and the biochemical processes that could create such complex aromatic patterns. The welcoming ceremony took place in a vast amphitheater carved from living rock, its surface adorned with flowers that chimed softly in harmonious tones. Hundreds of Zalithians had gathered, their collective glow creating a mesmerizing display of shifting colors and patterns. At the center of the gathering stood Princess Lyrelai, and Jackson's breath caught in his throat. She was young by Zalithian standards, perhaps equivalent to a human in her early 20s, with silver hair that seemed to move with its own breeze and markings that swirled in complex spirals across her pale blue skin. But it was her eyes that captured him, deep violet orbs that held intelligence, curiosity, and something that looked remarkably like mischief. "Honored visitors from Terra," she began, her voice carrying easily across the amphitheater. "We welcome you to our world with open hearts and minds." May this meeting be the first note in a symphony of friendship between our peoples." The crowd responded with a harmonious hum that resonated through the living walls. Princess Lyrelay descended from the platform, approaching the human delegation with fluid grace. Ambassador Theron whispered quick translations of the ceremonial responses they should give, but Jackson found himself distracted by the princess's approach. "Dr. Reed," she said, her violet eyes meeting his, "Ambassador Theron tells me you study the science of life. I am curious about your world's approach to biological harmony." "Your Highness," Jackson began, then paused, suddenly aware that hundreds of alien eyes were watching this exchange. "Your civilization's achievements in biointegration are remarkable. The way you've created symbiotic relationships between your technology and living organisms suggests a deep understanding of ecological balance that my species is still learning to appreciate." Princess Lyrelay's markings brightened, patterns swirling faster across her skin. "You speak of harmony between life and purpose. This is wisdom." She reached into a pouch at her side and withdrew something that made Jackson's xenobiologist heart skip a beat. It was a flower unlike anything in the Terran botanical databases, a crystalline bloom that seemed to exist somewhere between plant and mineral, its petals shifting through spectrums of color that human eyes could barely perceive. The flower pulsed with its own internal light, and as the princess held it, the light synchronized with the patterns on her skin. "This is a nethys bloom," she said, extending it toward him. "It grows only in the deepest chambers of our world, where life and stone become one. I offer this to you as a symbol of the unity we hope to achieve between our peoples." The amphitheater fell silent. Even the harmonious humming of the walls seemed to pause. Jackson glanced around, suddenly aware that something significant was happening, though he couldn't understand what. Ambassador Theron's patterns had shifted to what looked like alarm, but he remained silent. Captain Morrison stepped closer, his hand moving toward his sidearm, not threateningly, but with the instinctive caution of a military officer sensing tension. "It's beautiful, Your Highness," Jackson said, reaching out to accept the flower. "Thank you for this incredible gift." The moment his fingers touched the crystalline petals, the nethys bloom flared with brilliant light. The princess's markings exploded in a cascade of golden fire, and every Zilithian in the amphitheater began emitting resonant tones that built into a crescendo of harmonic celebration. Jackson stared at the flower in his hands, feeling warmth spreading through his fingers and up his arms. The bloom's internal light was pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat, and he could swear he felt something like awareness touching the edges of his consciousness. "Your Highness," Ambassador Theron said urgently, his patterns now definitely showing distress. "Are you certain about this choice? The nethys bloom ceremony has not been performed in 3 generations. Princess Lyrelay's eyes never left Jackson's face. "I am certain, Uncle Theron. Dr. Reed has shown proper reverence for life and understanding of harmony. The bloom has accepted him." "What ceremony?" Captain Morrison demanded, his hand now resting openly on his weapon. "What exactly just happened here?" The silence stretched uncomfortably until Elder Kythera, an ancient Zilithian whose markings had faded to barely visible silver traces, rose from her place among the observers. "The human has accepted the nethys bloom from our princess," she announced, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. "By the ancient laws of our people, he has agreed to become her bonded mate. The flower has sealed their union." Jackson nearly dropped the still glowing bloom. "I'm sorry, what?" "Oh no," Captain Morrison muttered, his face pale. "Reed, what have you done?" Princess Lyrelay stepped closer, her patterns now shifting through what Jackson was beginning to recognize as embarrassment, mixed with determination. "I apologize, Dr. Reed. I should have explained our customs before offering the bloom. But the flower has chosen you and our laws are clear. We are now bonded unless you reject the union and return the bloom to die." Jackson looked down at the flower in his hands. Its light was growing brighter, and he could feel a strange connection forming, not just to the plant but to the princess who had given it to him. The scientific part of his mind was fascinated by the bio-emotional resonance the bloom seemed to facilitate, while another part was panicking about the diplomatic implications. "Your Highness," he said carefully, "I'm honored by your offer, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. In human culture, we have lengthy courtship processes before considering marriage and—" "The bloom is dying," Elder Cathera interrupted, sharply. Jackson looked down and saw that she was right. The flower's light was beginning to flicker, its petals starting to curl inward. He could feel something like sadness emanating from the princess, her patterns dimming to muted blues and grays. "If you reject the bond now," she said quietly, "the Nethys bloom will die, and with it, any chance for true understanding between us. The flower bonds only with those who share harmony of spirit. Its death would be seen as an omen that our peoples are incompatible." Captain Morrison grabbed Jackson's arm. "Reed, we need to discuss this privately, now." But as they spoke, the flower's light grew dimmer, and Jackson realized that this moment would define not just his own fate, but potentially the future relationship between two entire civilizations. The xenobiologist in him was fascinated by the biochemical bonding process, but the man in him was terrified by the implications. Princess Lyra Lee watched him with those incredible violet eyes, waiting for his decision as the Nethys bloom continued to fade in his trembling hands. The cultural collision, the emergency council chamber deep within the Zilithian palace hummed, with tension as thick as the bioluminescent mist that swirled around the living walls. Queen Valdris stood at the head of the crescent-shaped table, her imposing figure radiating authority through patterns of deep crimson and gold that pulsed across her midnight blue skin. Unlike her daughter's youthful silver markings, the queen's bioluminescence spoke of centuries of rule, each pattern earned through trials that had shaped the Zilithian civilization. "Explain to me again," Queen Valdris said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute power, "how my daughter managed to bind our kingdom to an alien species without consulting the High Council." Commander Nexus, the Queen's military advisor, shifted, uncomfortably in his organic chair. His scarred face bore the testament of battles fought in the Outer Rim conflicts, and his markings had long since settled into the steady bronze glow of a career soldier. "Your Majesty, Princess Lyra Lee acted within her rights as a member of the royal bloodline. The Nethys bloom ceremony is ancient law. Ancient law that hasn't been invoked in 3 generations, Queen Valdris snapped, her patterns flaring to brilliant white. "And never with an off-worlder who knows nothing of our ways." Dr. Winters, the human cultural anthropologist who had been hastily summoned from the Terran delegation, cleared her throat nervously. She was a small woman with graying hair and sharp brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, her simple expedition clothes a stark contrast to the living luxury surrounding her. "Your Majesty," she began carefully, "if I may offer some perspective. From the human side, Dr. Reed is a respected scientist and diplomat. His acceptance of the bloom, while culturally ignorant, was made with genuine respect for your daughter and your people." Elder Cathara, ancient beyond measure, spoke from her place at the far end of the table. Her voice was barely above a whisper, yet it commanded absolute attention. "The bloom has chosen, in 7,000 years of our recorded history, a Nethys. Bloom has never accepted someone unworthy of the bond. Perhaps we should ask ourselves why the flower saw something in this human that we have not." Queen Valdris turned her fierce gaze on the elder. "Are you suggesting that a plant's biochemical reaction should determine the fate of interstellar diplomacy?" "I am suggesting," Elder Cathera replied calmly, "that the Nethys bloom is more than a plant. It is a living conduit to the harmony that binds all life. If it has accepted the human, there is purpose in that choice. Commander Nexus leaned forward, his bronze glow intensifying. Purpose or not, we now have a political crisis. Half the noble houses are in uproar over an alien joining the royal bloodline. Lord Vexthar's faction is already calling for the bond to be declared invalid. Dr. Winters pulled out a small tablet and began scrolling through data. I've been researching your cultural precedents. The Nethys Bloom ceremony appears to be irrevocable once completed, but there are historical instances of modifications to the traditional interpretation. What kind of modifications? Queen Valdris asked, her patterns shifting to cautious amber. Well, Dr. Winters continued, adjusting her glasses, according to the chronicles of the Fourth Dynasty, Prince Zareth was bonded to a partner from the mountain clans whose customs conflicted with court protocol. The Council of Elders established a period of cultural integration, essentially a trial marriage, where both parties learned each other's ways before the final bonding ceremony. Elder Kithara's faded markings flickered with what might have been approval. The concordance of understanding. I had forgotten that precedent still existed in our laws. Commander Nexus looked skeptical. That was a union between two Zilithian cultures, not different species entirely. The political implications are exactly why we need time, Queen Valdris interrupted. Time to assess whether this human can truly integrate with our society and whether this union serves our people's interests. She paused, her patterns cycling through deep purples and blues as she considered. Where are they now? Princess Lyrelay has taken Dr. Reed to the Harmony Gardens, Commander Nexus reported. She's attempting to help him understand the full implications of the bond. Meanwhile, in the luminescent paradise of the Harmony Gardens, Jackson Reed sat beside Princess Lyrelay on a bench grown from living coral, the Nethys bloom cradled carefully in his hands. The flower had stabilized once he'd made the conscious decision not to reject it, but its light remained dim, as if waiting for something more. I can feel it, Jackson said softly, staring at the bloom. It's like there's something trying to connect with my mind. Princess Lyrelay nodded, her own patterns, muted with concern. The Nethys bloom creates a neural link between bonded pairs. It allows us to share emotions, thoughts, even memories to some degree. But it requires mutual openness. That's incredible from a neurobiological standpoint, Jackson said, his scientific mind racing. The implications for cross-species communication, for understanding consciousness itself. Jackson, Princess Lyrelay interrupted gently, this isn't just a research opportunity. This is our lives. If we complete the bonding, we'll be connected in ways that your people might not understand. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not just an alien princess but a young woman facing an impossible situation. Are you having second thoughts? Her patterns shifted to soft lavender shot through with gold. I'm terrified, she admitted. I acted on instinct when I offered you the bloom. I felt harmony when we spoke about the balance between life and purpose, but I didn't consider what it would mean for both our peoples. Before Jackson could respond, Ambassador Theron approached through the garden paths, his diplomatic silver markings practically vibrating with stress. Your Highness, Dr. Reed, I'm afraid we have complications. What kind of complications? Jackson asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know the answer. Lord Vexthar has called for an emergency session of the noble houses. He's claiming that the union is invalid because Dr. Reed couldn't have given informed consent to Zilithian law. He wants the bond dissolved and... Theron hesitated. And what? Princess Lyrelay demanded. He wants Dr. Reed banished from Zilithia, prime as a threat to cultural stability. Jackson felt the Nethys bloom pulse in his hands, and suddenly he could sense Princess Lyrelay's emotions, fear, anger, and beneath it all, a deep sadness. The neural connection was beginning to form whether they were ready or not. "There's more," Theron continued reluctantly. "The Terran delegation is equally upset. Captain Morrison is demanding that you be returned to the ship immediately. He's threatening to report this as an act of diplomatic coercion." Coercion? Princess Lyralay's patterns flared bright red. "I explained the situation to him." "After the fact," Jackson said quietly. "From their perspective, it looks like I was tricked into an alien marriage." He stood up, the flower's glow responding to his agitation. "Maybe they're right. Maybe this was a mistake." The Nethys bloom suddenly dimmed, and Princess Lyralay gasped as if she'd been physically struck. Through their growing connection, Jackson felt her pain like a knife to his own heart. "Don't," she whispered. "Please don't reject the bond now, not like this." Dr. Winters appeared through the garden archway, slightly out of breath from hurrying. "Dr. Reed, Princess Lyralay, I may have found a solution." They turned to her hopefully as she approached with her tablet in hand. "Queen Valdris has agreed to invoke the Concordance of Understanding," Dr. Winters explained. "It's an ancient precedent that allows for a trial period of cultural integration. You would remain bonded, but the final ceremony would be delayed for one full cycle, about 6 months in human terms." "What would that involve?" Jackson asked. "Dr. Reed would remain on Zalithia Prime to learn your customs and laws," Dr. Winters continued, looking at Princess Lyralay. "Meanwhile, Princess Lyralay would spend equal time with our delegation learning about human culture. At the end of the trial period, both parties can choose to complete the bonding or dissolve it by mutual consent." Princess Lyralay's patterns shifted through rapid changes: hope, fear, curiosity, and something that looked like excitement. "You would stay? You would truly try to understand our ways?" Jackson looked down at the Nethys bloom, feeling its gentle warmth against his palms and the strange, wonderful sensation of another consciousness touching his mind. "I came here to build bridges between our peoples. Maybe this is just a different kind of bridge than I expected." Elder Cathara emerged from the shadows where she'd been silently observing. "The Concordance requires witnesses from both cultures and a formal declaration before the High Council. Are you both prepared for that level of scrutiny?" Jackson and Princess Lyralay looked at each other, and through their growing connection, he felt her determination matching his own. "We are," they said in unison, their voices harmonizing in a way that made the Nethys bloom flare with sudden, brilliant light. Elder Cathara smiled, her ancient markings brightening for the first time in decades. "Then let us see what harmony can be built between the stars." As they walked back toward the palace together, Jackson realized that his life as a simple xenobiologist was over. Whatever happened next, he was about to become something unprecedented. A bridge between two worlds, bound by an alien flower and a connection that defied everything he thought he knew about love, science, and the vast possibilities that awaited among the stars. The Nethys bloom pulsed warmly in his hands, its light synchronizing perfectly with Princess Lyralay's patterns, and for the first time since accepting the flower, Jackson felt truly certain that he'd made the right choice.